Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host. My name is Shaina, and it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the SEO Film Festival 2023, organized by the National Film Development Corporation (NFDC). We welcome our esteemed guest and delegate to the panel session with an engaging discussion on creating infinite world using animation, promoting India IPs on the success of creating world-class Indian IPs for the international market and the future of animation in India. We are honored to have among us as moderator for the session Mr. Chaitanya Chinchlikar, CTO, Vice President and Business Head of the Institute of Whistling Woods International to serve as the moderator for the panel session. Chaitanya has a multi-faceted two-decade career in the film and creative art industry. He is currently the Vice President and Business Head at Whistling Wood International, India's premier film and creative art institute. He has also served as the Chief Technology Officer for the Institute of Heads its emerging media initiative. He has been instrumental in the strengthening of film and creative arts education in India. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a huge round of applause for him, please? I would request him to please join me on stage. I am now delighted to welcome our first panelist, Mr. Jayakumar Prabhakaran, CEO, Toons Animation India, on stage as the first panelist. P. Jayakumar has expertise in the international animation content production and distribution industry. Co-executive producer for many award-winning animated television shows, featured film for media production house like Walt Disney, Marvel Studio, Paramount Pictures, Universal Studio, Lion Gates, Cartoon Network, to name a few. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Jayakumar Prabhakaran. It's my pleasure to invite the second panelist, Mr. Munjal Shroff, Director and COO of Graffiti Multimedia Private Limited India, on stage. Munjal Shroff is a media and tech entrepreneur with over 25 years of rich and diverse experience. He is the co-founder of Graffiti Studio, a leading production house and animation and visual effects studio. Please put your hands together for Mr. Munjal Shroff. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for gracing this occasion with your kind presence. I would now like to request Mr. D. Ramakrishnan, General Manager, NFDC Limited, to give the memento to our speakers. Let's give a huge round of applause for Mr. D. Ramakrishnan, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for doing the honor. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with this we begin our session. I would request Mr. Chaitanya Chinchlikar to take this session forward. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, I think it's okay. Yeah. No, it's fine. Yeah. No, it's okay. We'll see. If it breaks, then we'll see. Okay. Thank you, Shivani. So it's a very, very interesting topic for many reasons. One is, over the last 2.5, 3 years, while other industries have been suffering significantly, the Indian animation and VFX industry surprisingly has done really, really well. Much better than almost any other subsegment of the Indian media and entertainment industry. On the backdrop of that, you also have the animation, visual effects, gaming and comics and XR task force, which has been announced earlier this year, which has submitted its report, and we should see some of that coming out in the budget, hopefully, touch wood, in about a week from now. So in the light of this, there is a long and deep conversation that we need to have about Indian intellectual property and how Indian intellectual property can go globally, how do you customize and create Indian IP which travels well and is seen by not just diaspora viewers but non-diaspora viewers across the world as well. So let's start with you, Munjal. So we saw about 2-3 months ago, I think, did Anup and Deepa
season 2
came in November
season
sometime.
1 got released in August 15th, on August 15th.
So we now have this show that's in 20 plus languages in multiple
languages.
In multiple countries. A preschool kids show that looks, feels, sounds, is based in India, right? And has genuinely broken the, I don't like to call it always, but the diaspora barrier, right?
Yeah.
So a little bit about how you went about creating it, and what was the research and the work you did before that, and then during that, and what have been your learnings from this entire process? Take your time.
Thanks. So thank you, NFDC. It's a pleasure to be here at the SEO Film Festival. Let me talk a little bit about the show. So Deepa and Anup is actually a preschool show, like Chaitanya mentioned. The whole idea behind the show is that Deepa is this young girl who has a pet elephant who stays with her. And it's a color-changing elephant who basically expresses his emotions through the change of color. Deepa's family actually runs a motel called Mango Manor, and it's actually based in the US. I mean, hypothetically, we're never clearly saying what country, but the environment and the setup is American in nature. And you have a very interesting mix of guests who come to the hotel, and these two characters, in their over enthusiasm, many times go out of their way to make the guests feel extra special and extra comfortable. Obviously, that leads to very interesting situations, and they ultimately resolve in their own unique and fun way. And typically, it would start out by Deepa and Anup welcoming this guest to the hotel, and subsequently, the guest has a special need. Someone's, like we have a polar bear who's coming to hibernate. We have sloths coming and staying with them. We have the famous Bollywood actor coming and staying with them. So these interesting different characters. We have a wedding special, so we have an Indian wedding that actually happens at the Mango Manor. So the whole idea behind the show was that we wanted to create something which was meant for an international audience, but had a strong India connect. And the idea behind that show kind of started when my partner and co-creator, Lisa Goldman, she came down to India. And she, back then, it was the page 3 of Times of India, and she just saw this and saying, wow, Bollywood is really happening, these colorful parties and all. And that's where, and we had just finished producing a show with Nick, Je Bole To Jadoo, which was again based on Bollywood. So we said, sure, why not, let's start thinking of something, on these lines. And that's when we started developing a show together. And subsequently, we, over the years, I think the good part was the fact that Lisa, being an American writer, she came with that sensibility. Obviously, me being from here, obviously had the Indian sensibility. So somewhere, and also we were very clear that we wanted to create something for an international audience. And I think constantly there was this consistent idea that let's keep the Indianness to a point that it's interesting, and it doesn't overwhelm the product. And I think that's honestly, it's a very, very tightrope walk at every stage, whether it's a casting of the voices, what the characters are called, even music, like Daniel Ingram, who did the music, is a 5-time Emmy Award-winning music producer. And my brief to him was, obviously the first cut that came was typical sitar and tabla. And I said, this is exactly what I don't want. I said, there is so much more to Indian music. There's so much more to Indian music when you even hear Bollywood. So I made a playlist for him of Bollywood songs. I said, I want you to first listen to these 30 songs, then let's have a chat. I said, I don't want you to compose anything right now. Just have a feel for it, then let's talk. Even when we were casting, the first set of voice casts that came to us, they all had either a very thick South Indian accent or a very thick Punjabi accent. I said, there is, India is so much bigger, it has so much more variety, And I said that, look, even like the last name, so I mean, in the show you don't get to know, but we call them the Kumars, right? They could be from anywhere, right? So I didn't want to call them Swami or Singh or, whatever. So I think these are small decisions that we took, consciously making sure that things that make your show interesting enough, at the same time, it doesn't matter to a kid that the show is coming from India, right? For the kid, it's about, is the show interesting? Are the characters interesting? 150-pound elephant, changing color is definitely interesting for a child, right? And then through them, again, the other characters, there is Nani ji, who's basically the grandmother. So when Deepa calls out to the grandmother, she calls her Nani ji. But the grandfather is called Grandpa, right? And within that household, you have different characters. You have a monkey, who's there. Then you have a tiger who, incidentally, is also called Munjal. Okay, and and then the conversations within the family that happen. The food. So, for example, the kind of food that is being served to the guests. So you have pakoras, you have jalebis, you have laddus, and then you talk a little bit about each of these things. In every episode, you just leave that little bit of Indianness for people to discover. Like the Nani plays the veena, right? So again, I didn't want to use sitar because I said, okay, sitar knows. Ravi Shankar, thanks to him, I think sitar is universal today. So I wanted through this show that people see a little different side of India. At the same time, just keeping at that threshold of that people should be inquisitive about India and not an overdose of India.
So you made sure that you didn't overwhelm them,
yes,
but you did atypical stuff without overwhelming.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Which is what it should be. Also, the fact that, I mean, when I saw it, where I came from, is that it's very naturally Indian. It's not forced. You're not.
Yes, it's not forced.
Going
Absolutely.
out and, like in the wedding, you're not shoving it in their face.
Yes.
Right. So
yeah.
it's there. It's a matter of fact. It's who we are. It's that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, what works.
Correct.
Right. And that is also something that is that we see that has started to work in live action. A lot of this is who we are.
Yeah.
Works really well globally.
Right.
Right. So that's why a Hitchki does so well in China.
Right.
Or a Secret Superstar, or any of the other which are non-necessarily the big blockbusters. Right. So coming to you, Jaya, you all have a very, very strong history of doing a lot of content that is ideated, that has not been ideated by Indians. And then there is a huge repertoire of content that has been ideated domestically, right? Where of the 4 stages of the pipeline, the first stage, which is the ideation, has happened in India. Is your approach kind of different when you look at the outsourced pipeline as well as the domestic pipeline, or you're essentially working on the same standards for both? The reason why I'm asking that is oftentimes what happens is outsourced shows, they feel much better than local IP, which is not necessarily a good thing, which is not a good thing. Because then automatically you're saying, Acha, that is better and ye theek hai, IP hai, to matlab thoda saste mein banate hai, which I haven't seen in Toons, right? So that I thought was unique.
No, I think the first question is, why Indian IP, right? So, when we started the studio, we are one of the oldest studios in India. And when we started, of course, Cartoon Network was the only kids network at that point in time. And after that, a couple of channels started. And all of these channels were running all American shows or Western shows, and then dubbed it into Hindi. The problem, we all know, is that it is just 2 dimensions. One is a social dimension. And the social dimension, we all know that kids are glued to cartoons. And then they pick it up. They pick up a lot of stuff, right, from these cartoons. And I'm sure that, as parents, some of us realize. They pick up language. they pick up, the lot of behavioral, kind of things.
My daughter started talking in an American accent. We had to start checking her.
Yeah, so it has a lot of impact. So basically what happened, and in a way, we all know, in a way it is I don't want it to, this is not a negative sense, but it is a culture invasion, right? There's a lot of people who are, proponents of Western culture and all, we can see. They have never gone to America, or they have probably, many of those, 90% of the people have never gone. But how did they pick it up? This is through films and this is through television series. So this medium has a very significant impact on the behavioral pattern, the culture and all that kind of stuff. So one of the things which we, when we were thinking about, a show, and we were just doing outsourcing work. And I don't think at that particular point in time, anyone from the international community ever believe us, handling IP. So we thought the best is, to do an Indian IP. This was in 2000. And we selected a folklore from India called Adventures of Tenali Raman. It's a Tenali Rama story, which is a southern folklore, which almost everyone, like, Birbal and Akbar. That story is, kind of very well known. And we have not, I don't know, Chaitanya, you have ever watched any of those episodes. We have not really discriminated in terms of quality on that particular project with any other project.
No, you haven't. That's what I'm trying to say. This is one of the first Indian IPs that I saw where, whether it's an outsourced or local, it looks exactly the same.
Correct. But so it did well, and we partnered with Cartoon Network. In those days, Cartoon Network paid very small amount of money. I think, probably we have
not
got
changed too much.
Probably around 30 lakhs, where my spend is around 10 crore, right? So economically, this is definitely, but we were passionate. We wanted to do something to India. We wanted to do that. But I think, we are very proud of that, because, what happened after that, today we have 14 channels, national channels, and almost everyone, the strategy is as many local content as possible. Yes, there is problem. I mean, today, if a Cartoon Network is giving 20 lakhs or 25, that is the maximum these channels currently shell out locally. Where I do he can tell the Netflix shows or BBC shows and all, we're talking about, not even 4 times, $200,000-$300,000 minimum as the budget for a 22-minute episode. So we are talking about probably 10 times the cost. So I think, the quality is a function of cost to a large extent, right? So that is the reason why we are not able to actually produce content for local consumption. The thing. The other one is also, the moment you promote the local IP, it will have a significant impact on the local economy. So today, forget about the larger studios. And there is a larger ecosystem of smaller studios across the country working on these smaller shows. And that, even Kerala, it is a very small, kind of a place. In 3-4 years back, we have done a survey just to understand the ecosystem. We understood that around 100 studios in Kerala, not everyone is, 100, 200 people studios, small studios, but there is an ecosystem which is thriving. And, even if you look at the history of animation, it started in America. It went to Japan first, because Japan was the, closest and cheap at that particular point in time. When Japan became very expensive, the animation work has gone to Korea and then to Philippines and then to China and India. So if you really look at that, tomorrow Nepal or Bangladesh or any other country which will become cheap, the outsourcing work will automatically go there. So what is the long-term sustenance for our industry? I think is to promote, and create the intellectual property. We all know animation, one of the beauty of animation is the long-term shelf life. So if you really look at Tom and Jerry, created 70 years back, still minting money, right? So it's a real estate. Yeah. We don't sell, we license, right? So if you create that level of, kind of things on a good IP, then this is going to be this is a real estate for you. This is going to generate, kind of rental income every now and then. And, when we work with studios, and the projects which we worked 10, 15 years back, actually still generate significant royalty
Revenue,
income.
yeah. So I'm going to come to the business part because that's important. But on this, so every year I build out this huge presentation on the Indian media and entertainment industry of all the areas. So I still remember 2007. It's the first time when I started doing it. 80% of Indian kids' animated content was imported and dubbed. So you had something coming from France, something coming from Canada, US. You had Doraemon, Shinchan coming from this side and dubbed in a bunch of languages. Today, it's less than 15%. Right? So this 12-year, 15-year change, which has happened, where for 3 channels, 80% global content and only 20% Indian content, to 14 channels, 85% Indian content, that has really been the big change. So when everyone says, cartoon mein paisa hai, kya hai paisa? Right? Clearly. Now, on the, since you kind of brought up the business side, let's talk about that. You've got, A, you have the long tail revenue. B, because it's preschool kids, there is repeat viewing for the same content across generations. And C, the third thing, which I don't think we fully exploited appropriately, in fact, we've barely exploited, is merchandising and licensing. Whatever little happens pirated, right? Where somebody will take a high-res something and you have these t-shirts that are printing out stuff in various sweatshops of Mumbai, and they're selling on the road and selling here and there. So a little bit about, so Rajiv has done a very good job. Green Gold has done a really good job with Chota Bheem and Mighty Little Bheem on that. But a little bit about how you all have approached the third part, which is honestly in some cases one of the most revenue generating aspects of monetization of IP.
So I think you're absolutely right. I think merchandising in India is still a very, very untapped area. And I think partly it's because of the fact that I think both as broadcasters and producers, we've never managed to work together with that as a goal. And I think honestly it's a massively lost opportunity. I think part of the problem is that the broadcasters who have the wherewithal and the reach, because for any merchandising push, you need to have a strong presence on air, right? That creates demand, correct? Now, most of the broadcasters are very focused on pushing the merchandising catalog of their international brands, right? For a host of reasons. I mean, availability of product, merchandise is already there. You don't have to work too hard.
Also because they've spent much more on that
correct.
one.
I'm coming.
So
correct. So what happens is that, but the fact of the matter is that huge chunk of it goes away as royalty, right? So while you have laid the pipes, but then how much are you getting as in from an ROI standpoint? However, at the same time, if you have brands today which are doing well and which at this point of time almost 70-80% of the content is domestic content, right? But you don't see, unfortunately, you don't see that kind of a merchandising push, So I think that I feel is a lost opportunity, and I think it needs to be fixed. Honestly, I think we've had conversations with broadcasters on the same thing that hey, we need to do this. I think some of these things only happen over a period of time. I think one thing is definitely out in the last 10 years, the power of Indian IP, particularly in the domestic market, is very clearly established, right? Now it's about the broadcasters realizing that, hey, this is a revenue potential that needs to be tapped, right? That's one part of the story. Now, when we looked at our international shows, and I think having learned from, I've been in this space for more than 25 years now, right? So learn from that. We said that when we look at our international show, I want to work with a partner who's intrinsically very strong in this space, which is the reason why for Deepa and Anu, we chose to work with Mattel, right? And the reason being that you can't find a better toy partner than Mattel today. There's only Mattel and Spin Master, and then there's obviously Hasbro. And these three are giants, right? So for us, I think it was great that they liked the show. In fact, they said that, hey, we want to come on board, and it moved very quickly. right? And that's when we said that, great, I think that let me get a big boy on the team, because then they have the muscle, they have the machinery, and I don't need to go about on, doing that. And I can focus on what I do best, which is creating, good shows, and I wanted to focus on that part. I don't have to worry about distribution, I don't have to worry about merchandising and licensing.
Also, and I don't know if you've done tracking on this, is a lot of the second wave viewing happens after the first wave of merchandise publicity has happened by
Yes.
these people.
Yeah.
Right? So the merchandise is seen by a lot of people pushed by Mattel, and they're like, ye kya hai? Let me go and check the content out. Right? So
Yeah.
that is another.
Yeah, interestingly, so just just 2 weeks back, I got a mail, and we found there's some pirated Deepa and Anup merchandise with someone selling T-shirts on a US website, and we were like, hey, this is interesting. So I'm like wondering, should I be happy or should I be sad?
Yeah, both.
So it's kind of a mixed bag, but I think it's great endorsement for a product that people see the potential to go out and pirate, put out pirated goods, because there's a demand, right? So I'm telling the licensing team at Mill, guys, I think you should, speed up the act now, because there is a lost opportunity there, But I think that's what it is, that demand. You have to first create that demand, and typically with any show, it takes at least 2 seasons, for people to, put out the content, see how it's doing, right? I think in Deepa and Anup also, we are now at that point where we've done 2 seasons. Hopefully, we get on to the 3rd season. That's when we know that, yes, now there's definitely a strong case. The other thing also is, I think what is very unique and interesting with Deepa and Anup is the fact that this is a toy. It's not a toy first for Mattel. It's content first. So this is their first IP in the Mattel portfolio, which is led with content first. Which I think is again a very unique experiment that they've done. And obviously, I can tell you that internally the Mattel team is super excited with the way the show has been received. So I think most of these toy companies are also realizing that, hey, we need to first create demand, right? If you look at, for example, if you just look at the Mattel portfolio, you had Barbie, right? I think most of the Barbie movies are actually extended commercials for their toy line, right? So, but here's a different way of now looking at it, saying that, okay, let's go content first, So it's interesting how business models are also evolving, And I think it's now no longer a scenario where, I'm sure Jaya will agree, that one single broadcaster will say, here's a check, go produce. You need to go and piece. I mean, Jaya has done that beautifully. He's, partnered with so many different broadcasters across and get your show funded, right? So in these times, it's all the more important that you work out all these aspects. And then once you have across, like for example in Europe, once you have a successful show in Europe, your licensing becomes that much more easier.
Also, your sales agent game needs to be really good.
Oh yeah,
Right?
you need, I think
You need
it's
to break up your global rights as much as possible.
Yeah. Very,
This
very.
country, territorial, terrestrial TV, separate CNS, separate this, separate that, separate. So that your sales agent game needs to be really good at.
Yeah.
Whipcom
I think some of these guys, if you are lucky and if you are able to get pre-sales, if you have a strong distribution partner, you can come on board and you can start talking to broadcasters early enough and say, okay, look, we have a pre-sale. Even if it means they may not put money on the table, but if they say, yes, we will pick it up once it's ready, that's still good enough.
Yeah, because then you're no longer now dependent on the domestic market. Right? You're not saying like, "Arey, India mein koi animation nahi dekhta hai." So, your that is kind of buffered, right? There's a buffer there.
Yeah. See what happens. So I'll give you another example. Christian and Baltimore is a show that we produced, and it's again, the whole idea honestly came from the standpoint that I wanted to, take Indian folk art and Indian folk stories to children. It was something that Ramon sir, our chairman and our guru, believed that kids need to see this, right? It started with that, and I think we were very clear from day one that it has to be damn good quality, and like Jaya said, that broadcasters never really paid us, what we, because cost of production. I mean, they were saying, hey, you're spending so much money producing it, I mean, I still remember Krishna saying, hey, this is looking so much better than whatever else we have on our network, and I said, yeah, because I want it to be world-class content. And I think that investment in quality eventually paid off, because Netflix came on board and say, hey, we love this, and we would want to acquire it. They acquired it, they licensed it, they released it in 150 countries in Turkish, Polish, Chinese, and Korean. So our first deal was basically only Hindi and English. And within a month, they came back saying, hey, you know what, we are seeing traction in other countries. And Netflix is such a data-driven company. Within a month, they came back saying, we are seeing potential in these markets, so we would want to pick up these additional rights. And I said, sure, So, I think that testament of quality is always there. If you produce something which is good quality, it will stand the test, and the market will acknowledge you for that.
Yeah. So, Jaya, your journey of both distributed global sales as well as building out a merchandising pipeline.
No, I think my feeling is that probably it is about the ecosystem which exists in India is probably not very conducive for a very significant licensing merchandise. Various things, I mean, simple one is organized retail. If you really look at US and Europe, that is what is driving merchandising, right? And that ecosystem just started only in India. I mean, only probably 3-4 years only we allowed organized retail to the country. So I think it will take that, kind of a time, I believe. Second one is that, I also wanted to tell you, we have done one project with Nickelodeon, which we, at that particular time, we are lucky that, they agreed that we co-own. They own in India and we own outside of India. So what we have done is, it's a normal show, an Indian show. It is, produced at 20 lakhs, that kind of a price range. Then what we have done is we created a YouTube channel for that, right? And that channel has become the #1 channel in the world for slapstick comedy, right? I mean, at the peak of its time, we used to get around 500 million monthly views on that channel. 500 million monthly views. This is an Indian show, out and out Indian show. Though there is no sound and there is no voices and all that. It is an out and out Indian kind of a show. Yeah, the stories are it's like chase. So any kids, any part in the world, and we have we have around 15 million subscribers from around 200 countries. So I think I mean, broadcasters, of course, there is a lot of gatekeeping, and not everybody can enter into it. But if you are ready to create engaging content, there is definitely there are platforms available like YouTube. YouTube today is the biggest kids TV channel in the world. Yeah. There is no other kind of TV channel has that kind of an audience. So if you really wanted to build an audience,
the kids segment of YouTube was so large that it actually made them create a whole other app.
Yeah.
YouTube Kids, right? So now let's come to the C part of VVGC, and that's something that has kind of bothered me quite a lot over the years because I don't see too much of it happening. So two things. One is audiovisual adaptations of existing comic titles, and second is the emergence of new comic titles. So we all see the Avengers, yeah, very nice. So there are about 60 or so Marvel characters that are monetized in some way. What people don't know is that originally there were about 1400 characters created for those 60 to become popular. So that's generally the ratio. India, if you put the 4 big boys, girls, whatever you want to call it, with Amar Chitra Katha, Indrajal Comics, Raj Comics, and Tinkle put together, we have approximately 600 characters. Right? So that ratio is not the reason why someone asks you, why don't you have Iron Man? Because that ratio is not there yet. The global ratio, worldwide ratio is 60 is to 1400. We don't have 1400 yet. Right? So you need a lot more new IP coming in comics, and B, the existing IP to be monetized better. So now Applause has picked up the catalog. Hopefully they will do something in animation and not entirely in live action. Where do you see, like, if you look at something even as simple as, say, Raj Comics, right? Super Commando, Dhruv, or Nagaraj, Chacha Chaudhary, all that, there are ways to adapt it for the today's time. So where do you see that having stuck, and how do you think that stuck can be removed?
So, I would slightly disagree on the bit that you need to have 1500 characters. Then only said. I don't think that's not how it is. I think what people don't realize that look at the amount of comics Marvel has produced on each of those characters. If you look at the Spider-Man series or the Superman or Batman, and look at how that entire franchise has evolved. What people don't realize that before the first Spider-Man movie came out, there were at least a couple of hundred comics, right? You look at Japan, right?
Yeah, Spider-Man 600.
Right. You look at Japan, right? Japan releases a manga every week. They have 52 stories to pick from, out of which they look at which are the most successful of those, and those they pick out to produce the anime shows, right? So I think what we don't realize is that there's a serious investment that has gone into building that fan base. We expect, one movie we launch and we'll say one Indian superhero launch kar diya, chalo yaar, kal se tomorrow we'll go and stand in front of Iron Man. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's just people who don't understand the game, don't understand the business, come at it from a very shallow point of view, that they don't realize.
That is what I'm not. We need to widen
I think the thing is, let's look at an example closer home, Chhota Bheem. Why is Bheem today so popular? Because they have hours and hours of content. He's got over like 2,000-3,000 episodes bank sitting. That's what kids are feeding on. That's what kids are growing up on. And therefore, they will want to do a merchandise. And therefore, when any new any new episode comes out, there is only a fan base that you're leveraging. What is Marvel and DC leveraging? It is that fan base. Right, multi-generational fan base.
No, so not necessary. So, for example, almost I think the last survey they did, the last Comic Con that happened physically, 60% or 65% of the people who watched Marvel content have never even seen a Marvel comic book.
Yeah, but there is so much buzz already, right?
Right. So the idea is that first generation. Right? You want to create the first generation of adapters, people who are taking the written word and the still picture and adapting it to an audiovisual format. So, where do you see that happening in India? That's not happened yet.
It's not. See, I think what happens is when you look at all these shows, I'll give you an example. My son, he's now 17, but believe me, he knows more about Marvel and DC than I know. And his exposure has come not from these movies, it's from comics. Because he got into that and he really, he knows, literally he can tell me that, okay, this movie they picked up from this comic, right? Now, these comics were created even before they were born, right? But once he sampled that and he's like that, he already has 600 comics to indulge with, right? So it's always like a content that you like, you want to literally binge with it, right? Here he has 600 comics of Spider-Man to binge with, and for every Marvel and DC character, you have a huge amount of content to binge with, Having seen that, that's when you want to go and watch that movie.
So what do you think is preventing somebody from taking a Tinkle character or this character and make a movie or a series out of it? Yeah. Because it's not happened yet.
Yeah,
He's done it with Tenali Rama because the comics came
so
first.
I think there is, which is what I'm saying, there is potential for that. I was talking to Preeti from Amar Chittakarna and she was saying that they are trying to do that. And I think there is a whole generation of people who have grown up seeing those characters.
Exactly.
Right? So I think it's about both, not only the producer but the broadcaster also having the belief that, hey, this works. Look at Motu Patlu. Yeah. Right? There was an established fan base that was there, which you were able to leverage. Chacha Chaudhary, very similar, So these are characters, like Shikari Shambhu, I think is a wonderful character. Yeah. Right? You would, and I think they're trying to do something with that. So it's about building. There is a huge, audience out there, which needs to be leveraged. Also, I think what happens, the other interesting effect is, for example, today if I'm going and seeing an Iron Man movie, I'll tell my son, hey, this is a cool character. Right? Let's go and watch it. Right? So it's because I have grown up reading those comics, which I'm going to tell my kid. Now today, if it's a Tinkle comic and if Shikari Shambhu comes, I'll tell my son, hey, that's a cool thing. They were great comics. Growing up, I have read so many of them. Right? So it's about that. I think there are brands in India which exist, which have, that kind of legacy. ACK being one of them, those characters. But I think more critically, I think that it's these characters which are, original IP. Yeah. Right? Those are the ones that I think there's potential to leverage.
So you've done it actually. So
I think, we have done the first X-Men and Wolverine for Marvel. And I actually agree with what Munjal said. When we invested around $10 million to produce that, kind of show, and we were very comfortable because, the Wolverine and X-Men character were so popular. So our investors were comfortable in spending that kind of money. But, after 1 year or 2 years, really what happened to Marvel? Marvel was a loss-making company. I'm sure that everybody knows.
Hugely
It was a hugely loss-making company. And they were doing it around $200 million in top line and $30 million losses. At that's the time Disney picked them up. What really happened, I believe, of course, Marvel's characters are fabulous. Those IPs are fantastic. But what it really made the change is the Disney machinery.
Kevin
Which
Feige.
came into Kevin Feige and all. They came into picture. They put in serious amount of money. They created 10-pole movies, $100 million plus, kind of movies, back to back. In 3 years' time, they recovered the money. Then the rest is history. So I think it is the same. I don't think any of these characters, I don't think there is any problem with any of our characters and all that.
Absolutely
kind of
not.
stuff.
Which is what I'm saying.
The real
They're actually
problem
universal.
is that somebody need to believe in and put in that amount of investment and the other monetization mechanism. It's not just investment. Disney has the whole mechanism. They have the theater, they have the theme park, they have multiple
Merchandise.
monetization mechanism
Television.
where they will be able to recoup our money. So that ecosystem is something which is lacking in the country, which takes time. I think we need to be patient.
I think so. Interesting fact is that like when we did our first show, right, Je Bole To Jadoo, right, it was at a time where when Koi Mil Gaya launched, right, Jadoo was more popular than Hrithik Roshan among kids. Right? And that's the potential that we saw. We said that, hey, this is a wonderful opportunity. And we went to Mr. Roshan and said that, I would want to create a show out of this. And he says, man, I had so much trouble getting this show off the ground. He says, you have no idea. So I said, tum kaise karoge usko? And I said, no, sir, I think I believe it's a great opportunity. We created the whole character in CGI, showed it to him, and he says, sure, you have my Ashirwad, I think let's go ahead. And then we approached Nick. Nick immediately, I think it was one of my fastest commissions, we pitched it on a Tuesday, Friday, I had an LOI in my hand, because it was a no-brainer, we just caught the wave at the right time, and literally I think we signed in September, November 14th was our first show on air. I mean, it was insane. I would never do that again now, because we didn't know what happened for the next 8 months of our lives. Because we were just crazy busy just producing that show. But that's what it is, that you have an established character, you don't have to sell it. And Nick launched in India, rather relaunched in India with that as a flagship property, right? So I think there is absolutely a case that leveraging content which has been already established, but it takes time to build brands.
Yeah. Now on the new IP in comics. So I'll give you a personal example. So Whistling Woods puts up a stall, our School of Animation Comic puts up a stall at every Comic Con. We've been doing so for 10 odd years now. On the Sunday afternoon of every Comic Con, all the original comics that the students have created as part of their projects, they all sold out. Every Sunday afternoon. And every year we say, yaar, come banaye, next time we will print 50 more. And they sell out. Every single, for the last 8 years, every Sunday afternoon, 4 p.m., stall is empty. No more comics. And we are like, arey, we should have printed more, printed more. So there is appetite, there is hunger, there is... People want to see new stuff. People want to see well-styled stuff. Good ideas. It's not about kids. Some of these comics these kids make, students make, are really dark, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, boss, kidhar se aa raha hai sab darkness? But whatever, right? So, but it sells. I'm somewhere seeing a disconnect between the people actually wanting to buy this stuff and not enough, I don't like to use the corporate, but studio muscle behind creating new IPs in the comic space. So all these kids, they've all done comics. When they go out and work in the industry, they go and tell their manager or whoever is, can we make comic? And they say, no, you work on this, right? So that is, and I'm getting feedback, right? So help.
I think what happens is that if you look at the commissioner's psyche today, right? Let's talk someone like a Netflix. right? They would always feel more comfortable commissioning something which is an established book, which has sold 1 million copies. Okay, it's a low-hanging fruit, right? Also, I'm saying that fact that if it doesn't go well, he has justification. Hey, it had sold 20 million comics, so yeah, so it's a safe bet. You know, I think there are very few people who are willing to take that punt on something which is completely new or raw, right? And I can see the business logic behind it because same reasons, right? Fan base hai, aap banaoge, they will lap it up. At least, you know, your initial push will come, right? You don't have to go out and seek their audience. Their audience is there. They will come and seek your content if you put out something. So it is a bit of a chicken and egg problem, you know. But, you know, I think somewhere all these kids, my suggestion to them is that keep at it, keep growing your fan base. You know, you will reach a point of it.
So a couple of them who are really passionate and can't, they self-publish. Yeah. So there's one of our alumni, she self-published her first graphic novel. It did really well on Amazon. So somebody approached her and said, can you write one for us? Right? And so she created a second one. So she did How to Survive College and then How to Survive High School, and they're all available on Amazon. People are buying. So the reason why I'm asking the two of you is because the two of you probably represent the top 5 investors in original IP in the country. Thoda socho. Original comics ke bare mein bhi.
No, I think we have actually, you know, when we started, we started comic business, right? So we had 2 releases, Paka Toons and Classic Toons, if I remember, Kirit knows. And we ran it for around 2-3 years, and this was in partnership with Manorama. Manorama is a very famous newspaper chain in South India, in Kerala. But it didn't work financially. You know, finally we had to, you know, kind of shut down. I think, you know, I still believe, and I believe, you know, the traditional comic business, I believe it's a very tough business. Yeah. So I think it's very tough. I believe the real opportunity is in the digital, because you're right, the community is there. Yeah. How do we really bring that community to a digital, you know, I don't know whether you guys know, it's a thing called Wattpad. So this is an American platform where, basically what happens is anybody can publish your story there. You can put there and the audience will rate, right? And what happens now is that I got, you know, 3 stories option for movies, right? Because these are millions of people are watching and they are rating. And then what you are getting is your focus group basically, right? It is there. And they are rating, and you take top 2, and all the top 1, 2, 3 are all going to Netflix and Amazon and Apple and all that kind of stuff. So
getting optioned within 3 months, 6 months.
So can we really start a portal for a comic community, which we can help? Yeah. Because it is fine. You know, we just need to really bring the community into one place where all the people can really put their stuff there.
VGC policy mein dalna chahiye tha.
Right? So I think these kind of stuff, we need to really think slightly different rather than, you know, kind of worrying about our problem. I think, you know, we have grown, you know, this is my 24th year in the industry. So I can tell you that where we started from $3,500 to almost $30,000, $40,000, in a way, I'm telling you, this is very important to know. When I started the business, we used to get $100,000 as a license fee for half an hour from US. Today, you are lucky if you get 30,000.
30,000.
So that means 70% of, you know, per, you know, kind of thing, slashed. India, we started at 3,500. Today, you get 40,000. So we've grown 10 times. This is happening all over the world, guys. This is not just happening in India, all over the world, all developing countries, you know, Latin America, Spanish-speaking territory, Arabian-speaking territory, Africa. These are all, yes, number-wise it's small, but the growth is significant. And all the, you know, developed markets, US, Canada, Europe, all are coming down. Also because demographics. Population is also,
so
that was
the last bit I was going to talk about. Can we carry on? Or we've ended the time, but I don't know. So the fact that we have 700 million smartphone users, and we're still 40% headroom left, at least 40% headroom left. So how do you take that concept. The comic strip has disappeared from the newspapers, it has disappeared from everywhere. The only place it exists today is on Telegram groups, on Facebook groups where Calvin and Hobbes strips, like I'm a huge Calvin and Hobbes fan, so I see one every day and it's hilarious. How do you try and create some kind of those ecosystems for original Indian comics, purely digital, where there's no pen to paper, there is no physical thing. It's digital creation, digital distribution, either through social media or that, because that's the other ecosystem. And when these Telegram groups start to become large enough, 10 lakh, 20 lakh, 30 lakh people, you will have buyers who add themselves onto it, you will have commissioners adding themselves into it. So that is an opportunity that exists. Any questions? Oh, Anne has one.
Yeah, when will we see some good Hi. When do you think we will see some great animation shows for adults and not just for kids?
Great question. I think
Very, very politically incorrect answers.
I think the market is definitely ripening. See, I think what you have to understand is that why is it that today in countries like US or Japan for that matter, there's a market for adult animation. These are guys who've grown up watching cartoons and reading comics in their younger days. Like guys like us, right? I would today appreciate a BoJack Horseman. I would appreciate that humor and I wouldn't mind watching, any of these shows, right? Because I have a sensibility for animation, right? You today have a generation of people who have grown up on watching animation, reading comics, even in India. So I feel that there is definitely an opportunity for that, right? I think a lot of the times it's about the commissioners, whether it's an OTT platform or a broadcaster, coming on board and saying, yes, let's take that pen. Believe me, I have pitched shows, both to OTTs and to broadcasters as well, and you can feel that the man sitting across the table is always like wondering, yaar, kudu ke nahi kudu, So that, I think we are there, and I think, and not just us, there are so many people who I know, writers that I work with, they all, have ideas and thoughts, around that, So I think that like we had developed something called Mr. and Mrs. Madhyambargi, inspired from Pula Deshpande. So we had created something like that. We almost got greenlit for that, So I think there is potential for.
Should go and talk to Akshay from Planet Marathi. He'll do it. Sure. Okay. Thank you very much. We have gone 10 minutes over. Sorry, but it was an interesting conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Munjal. Thank you, Jaya. Thank you, everybody, for patiently listening.
Thanks a lot.